all for coming. This has been a crazy 2.5 years of working on a lot of stuff. So this is the culminating event of a lot of hard work on the part of myself and Kat and Rob and Mirabelle is back there in the back. It's been really great, and I'm really glad it's over. So I guess I'm just going to start. This is my installation over here. What I'm reading from tonight is actually from the critical creative hybrid work that I'm going to be filing with the library tomorrow morning. And I'm going to be kind of jumping around here, reading different parts of it, and it'll be a little bit explaining about conceptually where the project is coming from, and then reading some of the poetic texts that I did a lot more writing around this project than what appears on the installation itself. So it's kind of a mix of the other writing, what's on the installation, and then the critical reflection that I wrote about it. During his recent keynote speech at the New York Art Book Fair, publisher-artist Paul Chan spoke about a particular kind of artist, one he characterized as believing that the book is a medium that particularly manifests a particular pair of questions. How does one live? What does it mean to live? To Chan, a book creates an ensemble of relations, and the active value of a book lies in the tension between the differences and similarities of diverse and contradictory relations. A successful book is at once creating a conversation with its inner component parts, and as a whole, in conversation with the external history of books and information exchange. The integrity of the structure, this main piece, is actively trying to push at the boundaries of what we might name a book. In this rapidly shifting global cultural climate, people are constantly inundated with information in the form of images, text, video, sound, you name it. If creating an artist's book is about finding the appropriate form or container for a series of increasingly diverse ideas, concepts, images, mediums, and materials, book art, as I see it, is a revolutionary art practice of integration. The time you have, it's all you have to do with. The hands you have are all you have to grab with, all you have to hand with. You have all you have. When the time stops being handed to you, it's all that you have. You flash before me and vanish quickly into the crowd. At whatever moment, now for example, I'm being called continually outside, the need, broken across the pages and distributed widely, that dank emptiness gurgling in your pit. You've gotten hungry. When we rely upon ourselves, when we are ourselves, when we get to know ourselves, when we want to be ourselves, when to rely upon a self is to know ourselves. In the throe of selves, we relied upon ourselves. But nothing, oh nothing satisfies. It's all hidden behind your gut reactions, your gurgling instinct. It's all pouring and you couldn't want. You'd grown hungry, but you couldn't stop to eat. As it poured through, all the movements got traced and you imagined them enacted. Pushed through them, imagining their enactment. Flickering through them, mediated, recording, mediated and flickering, in pieces tied up, lined up, overlapping. He hesitated. I poured, recorded, mediated, poured. All stories start in the middle of something. When I was born, my life already had a shape that was connected to the shape of my parents' lives, to the shape of the house they brought me home to the yards I would play in, It had already begun before me. Intense self-identification bound up in intense building of interrelation, the connection overtaking and you pulling back, making space. I give and then I give again. The parts of self get smaller. The structures, imagined new. Self dissolves to new recognition. With each step, the last is wiped away and built upon, but the wiping is incomplete. Every life, every instance of existence is a palimpsest of all instances before it, simultaneously nourishing it and dismantling it, reifying it and rendering it utterly obsolete. We are so many teeming losses searching. To say it is human, to say everything. We are so many vices, to say spreading. Litany, in which I tell you about poems I've written since your unfolding, chasing after emergence, singing out and ringing the bells. I will not bend it. I'm going to be the past 10 years. The concerns of the integrity of the structure are ultimately rooted in subjectivity as a multitude of intersections. The subject is individual, as part of a larger whole, as an inner dialogue consciousness, as a physical manifestation, as an impulsive creature of affect and base emotional reaction, as the protagonist or antagonist, the oppressed or oppressor, of the manipulated and pliable narrative of history. As an agent with the power to move and act upon that narrative, the society, the other, oneself. At first glance, these concepts seem at odds, as our culture has upheld many of them in binary relation to one another, but I propose that they are in fact in a constant flux in their relations and inherently linked with a continuum of nuanced manifestations. There are always instances of oppositions existing together in unexpected harmony. The integrity of the structure attempts to create a space that encompasses those points at which the seemingly disparate concepts of mind and body, individual and society, are closest to one another, where their differences are troubled and held in direct tension. The overlapping of dialectical tensions in this space is intended to mimic the overlapping realities constantly competing for resources and attention that constitute our larger society. In the integrity of the structure, this intersubjectivity finds itself moving both through the space of the page and the space of the gallery. In the integrity of the structure, the reader, audience, finds themselves posited as subject. Okay, I'm just going to read a couple more poems that are writing that's around this project, but is not actually this project. Okay, this is called Self-Criticism and Repudiation of Earlier Works. Cracked and silent, loud, cracked and resonating quietly in the background. Stare into everybody. Feels like commotion. You signaling changes, signifying changes. Staring along the plane of a flat surface, like a table, like a horizon. A few open stools around. Just make yourself. I could be the doing, and all the people come out of nowhere, or they seem to, but the truth is that the rhizome has been growing underground for centuries, and it's every person standing outside, their hair being whipped around in the blustery New York November. Here I am thinking about the first time I came here when I was 10, digging through bins of trinkets in a shop in Greenwich Village, dropping my first cappuccino on the sidewalk and crying because I felt so grown up until that moment I was violently jerked back into childhood. I am sitting in a familiar spot that feels like a spot I rode past on another trip here Many years later, on a bike ride from Queens to Harlem, the same trip where I threw up on the floor of a subway car at 4 a.m. from drinking, and I thought, this is New York, as my friend shook his head laughing at me. It's all at once. It's collapsing and expanding all at once. Sometime. In a horoscope I read that I was deliberate, calculated, slow to act, but with a knack for knowing when the time was right. I remember hoping that it was true. The documentation is the memory. The documentation is the resulting conversation. Not so much inserted seamlessly in public as she was doing in public space. This train is not working with me. A lot of movements in front of engagement, remembering, engaged, remembered, happened on its own. I have to go from here to there, learn how to read by doing it. I'm pointing at tension. If you lose that, then it's falling apart. Elongated across time, the thing remains recognizable until pushed to its absolute extreme. To speak as an expert, beat after beat, one gives a sense of knowledge compounded, layered by experience, an accumulation of anxiety. Sitting in class next to an open window, regardless of my level of engagement in the discussion, whenever a breeze hits, I look out and for a moment consider jumping. There's no separation between us and not us. There's no separation between us and abstraction. Okay. Every earlier iteration. The aspect of color comes into play, emotional state secondary, a colored response. A really open setting given in rotation will get you somewhere,